Namaskar. Namaste. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners, those who are listening from the field of science, arts, commerce and engineering, the most honorable President Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, respected ministers and doctors, and advisors, reverend fathers and mothers, affectionate sons and daughters. I, Dr.RK from USA, heartily, cordially welcome your presence. Your presence is really praiseworthy, admirable and appreciable. As we have discussed, our nation is taking startups, initiatives in the presence of our most honorable President Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, whose role model is Swami Vivekananda, who expressed, appealed and advocated to the worldly people for maintaining the correct truth of our nation. He expressed strongly to the worldly people, my nation is known by culture and character. So while keeping these words of character and ideas, high thoughts, ideals for our society and nation, while keeping such ideas, today our President Prime Minister has taken an oath with the people for establishing the foundation of unity, a strong unity than before, stronger than before. While taking an oath with the public, dear friends, it is very necessary today another real life situation. Has two children aged 6 and 10. He goes to the state park and sees at the ticket counter a sign saying children under 5 free right before teaching. Counter, he tells his younger one, if the ticket clerk asks your age, tell him it is 4:45. We teach our children to lie for $2. The example below shows how a parent teaches good values. There is another man with 2 kids aged 6 and 10. He sees the sign too, but proceeds to ask for 1 adult and 2 tickets for children. The cashier looks at the younger one and asks how old he is. The father says 6. The cashier is amazed and says, if you hadn't told me, I would have never have known. He could have easily asked for under 5. The father replies, you would have never come to know, but my son would have. Guess whose kids are more likely to become good adults. Dear friends, lies, jealousy and ego whosoever feeds, time and again he dies in spirit as well in deeds. Mahatma Gandhi, who spent his whole life on the basis of such 2 strong fundamentals and principles of the life. So this doctrine, the truth and non-violence, he made understood the people what is the spiritual values of these fundamentals are, I repeat, we teach our kids to lie for $2. Once they grow up, they would sell their consigns for $2. Many parents at all, hence they compensate by being friends to their children and forgetting their responsibility as a teacher. Schools, not realizing that schools generally reinforce values taught at home. Many television programs show examples of kids being smarter than their parents and show parents as students. While growing up, we were taught to respect and behave appropriately. Respecting parents is a child responsibility, and behaving worthy of respect is the parent obligation. The younger generation believes in a new social philosophy, that is, respect must be earned, and that respect is no longer presumed but granted. However, we were brought up with and elders are worthy of respect till they prove unworthy. Some cultures, however, recognize that a person is not deserving of respect unless they have earned it. Respect is not the only element in holding a parent in high regard, but translates into behavior towards them that reflects their status as parents in spite of your opinion about them. Acts of caring demonstrate honor, as does refraining from actions that would embarrass them. By not giving them respect, we deny their worth in society. This is the story of a grandfather who lived with his children and grandchildren. They enjoyed behaving their meals together. As years went by, grandfather's health declined and his hands became unstable. Sometimes he supplemented the food, which became rather messy. One day, in the presence of some guest, grandfather dropped the dish. His son couldn't take it anymore. Rather annoyed, he said, I can't put up with Joey. I can't put up with you anymore. In future, you have to sit by yourself and eat alone in your room. He gave his father a wooden bowl that would not break. The elderly man roll-leveled as the old man was bared from dining table. Loneliness was his only companion. One evening when the son came home, he saw one of his sons busily carving a wooden bowl. He asked his son, who are you making this bowl for? The son replied, Dad, this bowl is for you. Shocked. The father asked, why? Of all things, he needed a wooden bowl to this. The son replied, I am preparing for the future. When you become an old man and start splitting your food, you won't be allowed to eat with us anymore. You will then need this wooden bowl to eat your meals alone in your room. The father quietly walked away with feelings of realization and remorse. He went straight to his father's room and said, Dad, I am sorry for what I have done to you. You took care of me. All my life, no matter how clumsy I was, you never made me eat my meals alone. I apologize for not giving the due respect and dignity that you deserve. Please forgive me. That night, the old man became an elderly father and sat at the table like before enjoying dinner with his family. Though the table got messy, nobody minded it anymore. Any culture that honors its elders is civilized in its true sense. A parent-child relationship is unique and irreplaceable. Irreplicable. Strangers do not place the same demands as parents do. It's not uncommon to see a 50-year-old feeling like a child in the presence of his parents. Honoring parents is one way to ensure that the elderly are suitably rewarded and feel wanted in society. It is a single thread that connects the two generations, and if ever a need comes to correct the parent, the objective is to do without putting them down. Children of weak and immortal parents can bring honor to their parents by their actions of doing good to the world. Yes and no generation. In order to teach children the right values, parents need to learn to say no generation represent people above the age of 50. What does that mean? It means that whenever we ask our parents for anything, they said no. By looking at their eyes, one could tell that when they said no, they meant no, and I better not ask again. Today's generation are the yes generation. Anytime they go to mom or dad and say, can I buy this? The answer is of course. Can I do this? Yes. Can I go to a restaurant? Of course. And if perchance in his life he gets a no, the child looks straight into his parent's eyes and says, why? And regardless of the answer, there is another why, and the next, and then the next. By the seventh why, most parents give up and say, okay, is this kind of interaction familiar? When you see an interaction like this, what's the first question that comes to mind? Who is the parent? The next question is, does a 4-year-old have the same maturity as a 40 years old. Sometimes we can answer all the whys and the child still may not understand. So the appropriate answer is because. I say so. Why are we afraid of saying? Because we say so. Even though our parents kept saying no and we keep saying yes to our kids, we realize we respected our parents much more than our kids respect us. People who have never learned to obey can never learn to command. Many times we keep buying expensive things for our loved ones, thinking we are giving them gifts. They may not be gift at all. They may only be apologize for the gifts that we never give them. To my mom, you taught me to do what's right when I took a calmly, when I took a candy without permission at the age of 3. You taught me that humanity is more important than an individual. You taught me that integrity was more important than grades. You taught me that. You taught me that acts of kindness are natural outcome of love. You taught me that values are more important than fortunes. You taught me that the tougher decisions are better, what's right and more right. You taught me that faith can move mountains. You taught me the importance of giving help to the less fortunate. You taught me to stand by my commitments by saying committed. You taught me that reading was more important than watching television. You taught me that laughing was better than crying. You taught me that honor was more important than honors. You taught me by example, I love you, Mom. At my center, I have heard parents say to me, it's so long as my kids are happy doing whatever they are doing, that all that matters. I ask them, don't you want to know what makes your kid happy? If beating up people on the street and taking gives them happiness, then their behavior is described by a word in the English language called perversion. Happiness is important, no doubt, but the source of happiness is equally, if not more important, value system. Many times parents keep saying everything within limits is okay. The question is stealing within limits okay? Is cheating without limits okay? Is lying within limits okay? Okay? There are some things in life that are just not okay. I loved you enough. I loved you enough to make you save your own money to buy a bike, even though I could afford to buy you one. I loved you enough to let you discover that your new best friend was a cream. I loved you enough to take a Milky Way, even with a bite in it, back to the drugstore. and tell him that you stole it yesterday and you were there to pay for it that day. I loved you enough to stand over. I loved you enough to stand over you for 2 hours, to have your room cleaned, an act that would have taken me 15 minutes. I loved you enough to let you see anger, disappointment, and tears in my eyes. Children must learn parents are not perfect either. I loved you enough to let you accept responsibility for your actions, even though the penalties were harsh enough to break my heart. But most of all, I loved you enough to say no when I knew you would hate me for it. But those were the most difficult battles of all. I am glad I won them because in the end you won them too. Dear friends, freedom is not free. It's a worth the price. Before his imprisonment, King Christian X of Denmark saw the Nazi flag flying on a Danish building. The king called the German commandant and demanded the flag be removed immediately. The commandant refused. The king said, a soldier will go and take it down. The commandant said, he will be shot. The king replied, I don't think so, because I will be that soldier that was removed. The owner of the flag represents the ideals it stands for. Upholding this honor is the pride of every citizen. Balanced seat of society. Parents of individuals collectively form a culture. A village once initiated a milk collection drive for poor children. It was agreed that before daybreak, every family in the village would contribute a glass of fresh milk. One villager thought, the whole village is contributing. If I put in water instead of milk, it will do no harm. Nobody will find out. They would have collected enough milk from others anyway, and I will have more for my family. In the darkness of the early morning, they all poured their contributions into a common container. At the appointed time, when the container was opened in the presence of all villagers, it was filled to the brim. But guess with what? Water. Are you like the villager in the above story? Would you like to live in a village where you have such neighbors? Responsible people are more interested in undeserved profits than individual responsibility. As members of society, we are all interconnected. Deceptions by any segment, whether in business or government, may not outwardly appear injurious to anyone, but they pollute the system and lower general moral standards. This raises the question, who forms the majority? Who forms the majority in any country? Is it the wise or the ignorant? It seems the ignorant generally outnumber the wise. If you go by sheer numbers, then the important shall always rule the wise. What a paradox. One day, a farmer walking down the street in a small town came across a large stone in the middle of his path. The farmer complained, "Who could be so careless as to leave such a big stone on the road? Why does someone not remove it?" He went away complaining. The next day, the same thing happened with a milkman. He too went away grumbling, but left the stone as it was. Then one day, a student came across the stone, worried that someone may fall over it and hurt himself. He decided to push it aside. He pushed long and hard all by himself and eventually managed to remove the stone from the path. He came back and noticed a piece of paper where the stone was kept. He picked the paper and opened it. Inside was written, "You are the true wealth of this nation." There are two kinds of people, talkers and doers. Talkers merely talk, while doers do. The moral of this story is that if you don't want to get right to criticize. Service to society is the rent we pay for the space we occupy on this earth. Citizens who forget duty and patriotism invite misery upon themselves and choose to call it divine punishment. We see rampant despair around us, but do nothing except pray to God for help. Why would God help those who refuse to help themselves? Self-questioning and introspection are essential to the health of any society. Inaction and irresolution are not empowering for anyone. Sitting helplessly, hoping and waiting for things, nothing but destruction. The wealth of a nation is not in material things, but rests on the integrity, courage and conviction of its citizens. Service to fellow beings may sound too idealistic, but it is the only way to prove that you care and that goodness exists. All great nations write their autobiographies through the action or inaction of the citizens. We need to decide whether we are a part of the solution or a part of the problem. And if we are not a part of the solution, then we are automatically a part of the problem. Nation has passed away and left no traces, and history gives the naked cause of it. One single, simple reason in all cases: they fall because they are people not fit, detached or indifferent. Curtailment of desire is seen as a step to contentment leading to a state of bliss. People have gone to the jungles and the mountains to attain this mental state. Prime example of detachment. Prime example of detachment in modern times is Mother Teresa, who stood up for the poorest of the poor. Her actions were prompted by courage of conviction. She acted with integrity to achieve her objectives. She confronted those who opposed her good work with no regard for recognition or position. She disregarded corrupt authority for the welfare of those who could not fend for themselves. She left her own country and worked in the streets of Kolkata to alleviate the miseries of the forgotten and downtrodden of society. The sheer courage displayed turned this diminutive woman into a giant in the eyes of the world. The world became a better place to live in because of her dedication to humanity. Keep your presence continue as you are listening. The words to motivate you yourself. Hands that serve humanity are a lot better than lips that talk of divinity. Prime example of detachment in modern times is the Mother Teresa, who stood up for the poorest of the poor. Her action was prompted by courage of conviction. She acted with integrity to achieve her objectives. She confronted those who opposed her good work with no regard for recognition or position. She disregarded corrupt authority for the welfare of those who could not fend for themselves. She left her own country and worked in the streets of Kolkata to alleviate the miseries of the forgotten and downtrodden of society. The sheer courage displayed woman into a giant in the eyes of the world. The world became a better place to live in because of her dedication to humanity. Hands that serve humanity are a lot better than lips that talk of divinity. Socrates has said, I believe that to have no wants is divine. Again, this is detachment, not indifference. People who are indifferent in life are people who have failed to live. Often we see indifference conveniently labeled as detachment. If injustice is happening to your neighbor and you can sleep, wait for your turn because you are next. Public activity is a citizen's highest responsibility. Cause for collective downfall. Indifference a curse. A heart that does not feel pain upon seeing misery and injustice in society is spiritually dead. Watching citizens postpone, facing reality is like watching a nation busily gathering material for its own funeral. The indifference of citizens towards society is the worst curse a society can face. Indifference is inhuman. Honorable leaders in the world could have remained indifferent to the injustice around them and called themselves detached. But something bothered them and angered them enough to get them involved. Often you hear that anger is a sign of weakness. But if you go back in history, you will find that No change ever took place till somebody got angry. Is it not inhuman to see someone's pain and remain indifferent and call it detachment? Is it not one's honorable duty to give voice? A culture of silence in the face of injustice is worse than indifference. To emphasize is to be bothered enough to take action to alleviate another's pain. In Germany, first for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came degenerating society. In every society, some people do not want to work. Some are afraid of facing up to danger, and some have no love for their community. Such people get an upper knees. Good citizens do not rely as much on society as society relies on them. Edmund Burke says, for evil to flourish, good people have to do nothing, and evil shall flourish. Pay off in itself. In a free country like our own, every male brought into existence should be taught from infancy that the military service of the Republic carries with it honor and distinction, and is very committed with the ideal that even death itself may become a boon when a man dies, that a nation will live and fulfill its destiny according to General MacArthur. Strength in unity. There was a flock of quails that lived together in peace. They had resolved what? Whenever a quail to catch them, they would all put them heads out through the mesh and with one force lift off and fly away. Then somehow they would pull themselves out of the net and fly free. The catcher was never able to capture the quails because they were always helping each other. His only wish was that they would start quailing. One day, his wish was granted. While landing, one of the quails accidentally hurt another on the head. This made the quail, who was hurt, angry. The first one quail angry with this made the first quail angry as well. The catcher saw his chance. Seeing them quarreling, he threw his net. Too busy arguing among us themselves, the quails forgot to put behind lifting the net, and the catcher was finally successful in capturing them. Moral of the story: an outsider can only take advantage when there was problem with him. Till then, he is helpless. Similarly, in most societies, the problem are within. Well-directed individuals, efforts can accomplish a deal. In fact, such efforts encourage other individuals to join in, generating a momentum which is crucial to bring about change. The dedicated and combined efforts of has unlimited potential to improve society. A great river is the sum total of many little streams and rivulets which come downhill, channeling together. Similarly, when thousands of self-sacrificing citizens join in a society becomes vibrant. It encourages mutual helpfulness, stimulates pride, brings dignity to work, and broadens our mental horizons. What does Alexander I. Solzhenitsyn says? The salvation of mankind lies only in making everything the concern of all. We must remember two cardinal truths. Greatness emerges out of goodness, and democracy never dies suddenly. It gradually becomes defunct through the indifference of its citizens. What does John F. Kennedy says? Ask, responsible citizens have great mission in life. All great leaders in history had their personal agendas totally aligned with the national agendas. There was no hidden agenda. A free nation needs to remember with gratitude its freedom possible. A nation that forgets its freedom, fighters, stands to lose its own freedom. God and the soldier. God and the soldier, all men adores in time of trouble and no more. For when war is over and all things righted, God is neglected, slighted. Patriotism, is it necessary? Is it necessary? The creed of patriotism has met with many critics in its long history. According to Samuel Johnson, patriotism is the last use of this scoundrel. If treachery is to be camouflaged under the cloak of patriotism, then Mr. Johnson is right, but that is not patriotism. If that were patriotism, then the Washingtons, the Lee Kuan Yews, and the Lincolns were scoundrels. Three questions arise. Is patriotism national pride or chauvinism? Is refuge spending a waste of precious resources? Isn't patriotism outdated in the age of the global village? Citizens must realize that every product of the carries the level made in, also carries the respect and dignity of every citizen of that country, making the finest product to the best of their ability is true pride in the country. Taking pride in one's own country translate into the attitude, my country is better than yours. That is very distorted point of view. Patriotism which involves pulling down other nations amounts to chauvinism and is criminal. People argue that in the name of patriotism, billions of dollars are spent on armies, money which could have been better used for humanitarian purposes. But so long as there are terrorists and people like Hitler in this world, threatening the respect and dignity of other nations and oppressing humanity, there will always be need for armies to defend the honor of peace-loving nations. No wonder they are called defense forces, not attack forces. Would any self-respecting nation greet like Hitler with bouquets and flowers? It is said that the world today has become a global village and territorial boundaries have become meaningless. Are we not forgetting that a nation is much more than barbed wires and gates of steel, just like a title deed? Territorial boundaries of a country have their own sanctity. Traitors who betray their country for a handful of gold are never happy. They end up losing everything. A young girl used to go out of the fort to draw water every day. Once the enemy besieged the fort and appealed to the girl's greed by offering her great wealth and jewels. A bargain was made, and as agreed, the girl unlocked the gates at midnight to let the enemy in. As the first soldier entered, the girl asked him for her reward. He said, "Take your reward," and chopped her arm. The next soldier did the same thing as did the one after. She lay dead as the nation she had betrayed. A French writer once said, "More men are guilty of treachery through weakness than through a studied design to betray." Benedict Arnold was one such traitor. During the American War of Independence, he sold military secrets to the British. His countrymen discovered the plot, but Arnold managed to escape to England. However, even in England, people did not want to speak to him or to be seen around him. He was grossly insulted in public places. It is said that some people spat on his face. Wherever he went, his reputation followed him. He was always known as Benedict Arnold, the traitor. Freedom is not free. Dear friends, you are listening. Justice, truth in action. There is no crueler tyranny than that which is perpetrated under the shield of law and in the name of justice. Charles Lewis, please. Second date. Baron D. 1942. Justice and honorable living go hand in hand. Where law and justice do not exist, tyranny prevails. Mayor LaGuardia was once residing at a New York City night court. The weather was cold and wintry. All of a sudden, a trembling man was brought in and chased and charged with stealing a loaf of bread. When questioned, the man explained that he had to steal in order to feed his starving family. LaGuardia declared, "I have to punish you. There can be no exception to the law. I fine you $10. As he gave his verdict, he pulled $10 from his pocket and paid the fine. Furthermore, he declared, "I am going in this courtroom 50 cents for living in a city where a man has to steal bread in order to eat." Mr. Bailiff collects the fine. Mr. Bailiff collects the fines and gives them to the defendant. People must be held accountable for their actions and be made to bear their consequences. But at the same time, the judicial system must also show compassion in situations that generally demand it. Justice should not only be done, but also be perceived as having been done. This is not to say that people will be allowed to get away by doing wrong or commit a crime in the expectation that they will be forgiven on compassionate grounds. Many perpetrators take great comfort from the feeling that because they have the opportunity to lie and go scot-free. The greatest incentive in committing crime is the assurance that one can escape punishment if crime is overlooked. It encourages the perception that moral wrongdoing is acceptable. Such an attitude would amount to an exploitation of compassion that is built into a genuine understanding of justice. Justice must distinguish between the vicious and the unfortunate. René Descartes says, a state is better governed which has but few laws, and those laws strictly observed. There is an ancient story. Once seat were traveling together. Truth looked rather starved and was wearing rags. Deceit said, "You seem to be in a pretty bad shape." And Truth replied, "Yes, I am. Nobody respects me or even gives me a job. In front of me, Deceit convinced the Truth to follow his way and change his lifestyle for the better. Truth decided to follow Deceit on the promise that he would not say anything against Deceit. Truth decided to follow Deceit not because he felt that it was right, but because he was starved. They went to a fine restaurant. Deceit placed the order and they had some of the finest food. But before they got down to paying the bill, Deceit shouted and called the manager and said he was waiting for the change from the waiter. The waiter was summoned. He was stunned because he had not taken any money. Deceit shouted at the manager, accusing them to be a bunch of thieves and taking innocent people for a ride. The manager became concerned about his reputation, refused to accept any money, and instead gave out money from his own pocket, which was to have been the change. If what was being said was true, Deceit and Truth heard the manager shouting at the waiter and threatened to fire him despite his protest. The waiter wondered in his heart if Truth had deserted hard-working souls. Truth felt guilty and said to himself, "My judgment gave way to my hunger." Deceit came out walking tall. Truth could not take any more and parted company silently. As per the saying of Mahatma Gandhi, there are no principles on empty stomach. It is rightly said. Thank you, brothers and sisters. धन्यवाद भाइयों और बहनों.